The Gloriana set by ThebeMoon. Read by LMX Mabella. Chapter 44. Listening. The rattling of metal casements woke her from her restless doze. Hermione barely opened her eyes to see a shadow pass by her window. She scrambled out of bed and stood in shock, but Draco was hovering just outside on his broom. "Draco!" she cried, opening the large hinged window. "Are you mad? Get in here!" He leaped over the desk and landed in the room, shivering, broom in hand. Draco's cloak dripped with icy sleet, and his cheeks and nose were blue with cold. Hermione stripped the cloak from his back and hustled him over to the small fire, which she ignited into a leaping flame with her wand. "What were you thinking?" she scolded. "It's freezing out there. Here, give me—" She stopped, remembering Theo's words, and backed away. Draco propped his broom against the wall and stripped off his gloves, holding his hands out to the fire. Crookshanks growled, jumping onto the sofa back. Slytherin and Cat glared at each other for a moment, both obviously holding grudges from the carriage ride into Hogwarts. A lifetime ago. "You weren't at dinner," he said, turning from Crookshanks with a slight sneer. He looked Hermione up and down from bushy hat to thick wool socks. "I wanted to check." "I'm fine, thank you," she said calmly. She cleared her throat. "Would you like some tea?" "Yes, thank you," he said, giving her an odd look. "Extra sugar?" "Why are you being so polite?" Draco demanded. "Why aren't you laying me out for riding in sleeting rain?" "It's your choice," she said, heating a pot of water with her wand. "You're a grown wizard." He snickered. "As if that ever stopped you before." Hermione was adding tea leaves to the strainer when an icy hand covered hers. Draco stood behind her, his breath in her ear. "The wind is quite strong out there, you know," he said provocatively. "I could hardly stay on my broom. I was riding one-handed at an excessive speed, and I didn't even wear a hat." Hermione spun around to face him. "Draco, She shut her mouth and swallowed. "I'm sure you'll be fine." Draco put his other hand on her forehead. "You must be ill. Either that or—" He stared at her, that spooky Slytherin sense at full power. "Something happened. You didn't come to dinner, and neither did—" "Theo!" "Please, Draco, stop. It was nothing." "What did he say? Tell me." Hermione sighed. "I made a mistake. I shouldn't have spoken to him. I wanted to warn him about Regis, but it went all wrong." She felt a tear on her cheek. "He thinks I'm interfering." She couldn't say it. "He thinks I smother you and order you." She clutched Draco's arm. "You'd tell me, wouldn't you? If I go too far? If I start driving you away because I—" "What drivel is this?" Draco demanded. "When have I ever held back on you? Do I look like the type to suffer in silence?" He glared down at her. "You're pissing me off right now, if you must know, with all this nonsense." "But I'm so bossy." Yes, you are," Draco said. His lips quirked. "I look forward to you bossing me around in all kinds of ways. Number 6, perhaps." Hermione blushed fiery red. "Draco!" He was grinning wickedly, and she couldn't help smiling back. "That's better," Draco said, walking towards the fire again. He began peeling off his shirt. "You wouldn't happen to have an extra blanket, would you? I'm freezing." "No less than you deserve, riding on such a night." Hermione grabbed a thick blanket off her bed and draped it around him. She smiled again at the sight of the Slytherin prince wrapped in a red blanket with an embroidered gold lion. "Really, Granger?" Draco asked, looking down at himself. "Does this have to be so? Gryffindor?" "Feel free to freeze without it." They curled up on the sofa, and Draco produced some wrapped jacket potatoes and a warming chum and some crusty bread. Hermione felt much better after eating the food and drinking a few cups of hot tea. "You can't come rushing up here every time I miss a meal," Hermione said. "Sometimes I just want to study." "I spoke to the Weaslette," Draco said. "She seemed concerned." Hermione looked into the fire. "I was upset." Draco's arm tightened around her. "I should have told you not to warn Theo," he said. "When we Slytherins are hurt, well, we'll go for the jugular." "You certainly do," Hermione said, "but I had to tell him about Regis." "Hermione." Draco looked into her face, his eyes serious. "You need to consider the possibility he might be working with those Death Eaters. I know the signs. He's withdrawn from everyone, even Blaze and Pansy. No, Hermione shook her head. Never. With such a father, you never know. Hermione sat straight up, pulling away to face him. She couldn't believe Draco was saying this. That's what they said about you. And they were right, Draco pointed out. Theo might not understand what it means to be Death Eater. I didn't understand what it meant. No, Hermione shook her head. I don't believe it. I don't want to believe it either, Draco sighed. Fine, let's say you're right. At the very least, they are trying to recruit him. That's why he can't leave the castle, Hermione said. He'll be at the mercies of the Death Eaters and the Aurors Draco. She took his hand. Theo received a message Halloween night and ran off. He wouldn't tell me anything. I think he tried to leave the castle. That's why he's serving extra detentions. Draco's face was sober. That doesn't look good for him. Did you tell Potter? The Aurors would be all over Theo if they knew. He groaned. You're taking a big bloody risk here to protect him. Theo's not a Death Eater, Hermione insisted. Honestly, she spent half her time these days defending Draco to Theo and Theo to Draco. You can't take care of him, Draco said. You can't take care of everyone. She leaned against him. I know. Aren't I enough to take care of? He whispered. More than enough, Hermione said, smiling again. Too much for most, I'd say. Draco kissed her for that, and she ran her hand over his now warm skin, his muscles so smooth to touch, except for the silvery ridges from the sectum sempras. Her hand slid down his arm over the dark mark. He could feel its roughness under her fingers. Hermione broke the kiss and brought the branded skin to her lips, causing Draco to gasp. Hermione, he groaned. He shifted, pressing her gently down on the sofa cushion, his body on hers. She stared up at the perfect pointy face, his fair hair falling into his eyes, those full lips. Then those lips were on hers again, his hands moving up from her waist under her cotton pajama shirt, rough palms against her breast, thumbs brushing her nipples. Hermione moaned against his mouth, her hands tangled in his hair. Pelvis rocked up against his, and Draco groaned again in his throat. Suddenly he slid off of her, and Hermione felt herself being lifted up as if she weighed nothing. Ginny! She gasped as he set her down on her bed. Ginny will be back soon. Not if Blaze has anything to say about it, Draco said. He withdrew his hands, however, and stood over her bed, his eyes serious. This isn't the Charms Room, Hermione, and I won't be that idiot again. You'll have to tell me what you want. Hermione sat up straight. I want you, Draco. But I'm not ready, not tonight. He nodded. I'll go then, he said, but don't worry, we'll have... Hermione's hand shot out to stop him. Would you stay? She asked. For a while, anyway. His mouth quirked up again. You're really asking? No, she said bossily. Get in this bed, Draco Malfoy. Much better. Draco peeled off his trousers and socks, settling in beside her like they did this every night. Hermione turned off a lamp with her wand and revelled in his warmth. She felt utterly safe in a way she hadn't felt since she was a small girl, before she had ever heard of Hogwarts or the Wizarding World. The only sound was the clattering of Crookshanks knocking over objects on her desk, his way of protesting the unwanted visitor. Don't doubt me like that again, Draco said after a time, his voice soft in the darkness. And don't listen to sodding Theo, or Astoria, or that balmy gamekeeper, and certainly not your pet Hufflepuff with the ears. That man couldn't plan a hot cup of tea. Now who's giving orders? She said, her cheeks on his bare chest, her arms around his waist. Whom can listen to then? Me, of course. He considered a minute. And the Weaslette. I suppose Longbottom, and your precious Potter, if you must. And Ron, she said, yawning. Sometimes. If you must. What about Luna? Only about sex, Draco said. I don't want to hear about niggles. Nuggles, Hermione said, yawning again. Had his lips against her hair and warm arms tightening around her, and she wanted to thank Draco for being so nice, just to hear him huff in irritation at being caught nice, but she was too tired. She'd have to taunt him about his niceness tomorrow. Draco was gone when Hermione woke Thursday morning, but he left a little box on the pillow beside her, wrapped in silver paper. He stood out of bed and sat cross-legged on the sofa, the Gryffindor blanket around her, holding the box and thinking about the day before. Theo's words still hurt. but it was a distant, muffled ache. Thea was mixed up in something, she knew it, and he was determined to go it alone. "You can't take care of everyone," Draco had said, and she knew that was true, but still, she couldn't give up on Thea just yet. Maybe she could. "What's that?" Ginny asked, popping out from her bed hangings. Her legs looked impossibly long under the hem of one of Harry's faded red and gold Quidditch jerseys. Urgh. It looked like another cold day ahead. Winter in Scotland never arrived quietly. Ginny dragged the duvet off her bed and sat beside Hermione yawning. The redhead never started her day early if she could help it. It was barely 7 o'clock. "It's a present from Draco," Hermione said, turning the box over in her hands. "So he came, did he?" Ginny's eyebrows rose. "Maybe in more than one way. I nearly fell over his broom last night." Hermione rolled her eyes. "We talked, mostly. Aren't you going to open it?" Ginny asked, bunching the duvet closer around her. Hermione pulled at the ribbon holding the silver wrapping, then opened the box. Inside was a silver ball stuck to the bottom by a sticking charm, its tiny wings fluttering in vain. Hermione touched her wand inside her pajama pocket and whispered its release, catching the snitch in her hand as it shot upwards. She raised it up to the lamplight. It was the same snitch she had nicked from Malfoy outside her window. Crookshanks jumped down from her now jumbled desk, watching the ball with wide yellow eyes. Ginny's face was odd. "It's so beautiful." Hermione pulled a note from the silver wrapping and shook it open. It was written in runes. "A proper snitch for your flying lessons. LDLM." Hermione's hand tightened around the fluttering snitch, and the last ache from Theo's words melted away. What he said about Draco didn't matter. Theo was angry. He didn't know. Nobody knew, really. Hermione herself couldn't explain it. How did Draco know exactly what to do and say? Was it his upbringing, a Slytherin talent? Or was she the only one who... "I'm surprised he bought you a snitch of all things," Ginny said. "It must have cost a fortune." "It's his snitch from home," Hermione said, handing it to her. "See? He changed the engraving from his initials to the rune for H." "It's his snitch? That's incredibly significant. For a seeker to give his snitch to..." Ginny's eyes were wide. "Now we're talking serious." "It has sentimental value," Hermione said. She took back the silver ball and stroked it fondly. "I tried to blackmail him with it." "You two have a very odd relationship." Hermione couldn't deny it. "I know, I can use it for my arithmancy presentation," she said, jumping to her feet. "How's Blaise?" she asked, putting on her robe. Ginny was stretched out on the sofa now, the duvet covering everything but her face. "Much the same. Sexy, charming, irresistible." Her voice was full of disappointment. "Have you been talking to him?" Hermione asked. Her roommate nodded. "I've told him about Fred. I've told him about the Battle of Hogwarts. Last night I spoke of 7th year. He looked a bit sick whenever I mentioned the Carrows. He followed them, you know, both he and Astoria." The two women exchanged a look, then Ginny sighed. "He won't share anything with me. I asked about his mother and..." The air in the room seemed suddenly heavier. Caprice Sabini had a rather unsavory reputation, although purebloods flocked to her extravagant globe-trotting parties involving illegal portkeys. Rumors swirled around the mysterious witch about the fates of her multiple husbands and the dark spell she'd used to preserve her incandescent beauty. "Blaise just wanted to talk about her jewels." Ginny sneered, a rare expression for her. "Her jewels! As if I cared!" Hermione walked over and stroked her hair. "Just give him some time. He might come around." "And he still keeps going on about Christmas at Sabini Castle," Ginny continued. "Apparently, it must be seen to be believed." She frowned. "I don't care if the place is made of plum pudding. I'm not leaving my family." "Maybe Blaise would come to the Burrow," Hermione said. Ginny laughed outright. "Can't you imagine? Ron would go spare." "So would Harry," Hermione said mischievously. Harry had already made plans to spend Christmas with the Weasleys and host a New Year's party at Grimmauld Place. "That would be almost worth it." Ginny's eyes were sparkling again, and Hermione gave her a hug before heading off to shower and dress. Ginny sat in her bedding nest on the sofa and watched Hermione twine her curls around her fingers as she dried them with her wand. then tied them at the back of her neck with a wide black ribbon. Hermione had just straightened her tie by the wardrobe mirror, was applying lipstick when Ginny spoke. "Are you humming?" she asked. "Certainly not," Hermione said, tucking her lipstick away. "It was something classical, I think." "Probably from Sakon's party," Hermione said. She had been thinking about that night, about the candelabras, and she flushed slightly. Dancing with Draco after meeting Vasile, Draco's hand on her bare back, and Hermione trying to keep space between them. "Yes, that's it. You were humming the waltz," Ginny said, grinning. "You are going to be revolting all day, aren't you?" Hermione waved the last of her books into her bag and grinned back. "Probably." To be continued. Next up, Hermione tries to be discreet. Luna hunts love diggers. Some people are very bad at silencing spells. Thank you for listening to this chapter of the Gloriana set by ThebeMoon. If you would like to stay up to date on upcoming chapters and stories, you can follow me on YouTube, AO3, or Spotify.